And as a conservative, as someone who believes in and cares about the Constitution, I have thought deeply about this. And because of the danger that Donald Trump poses, not only am I not voting for Donald Trump, but I will be voting for Kamala Harris in this election.
Welcome back to Battleground. Former GOP Congresswoman Liz Cheney talking about her support for Kamala Harris. Despite Donald Trump's takeover of the Republican Party, there are still a sizable number of Republicans who do not support the former president, and how they vote, or if they vote at all, could be a big deal in November. For more, I'm joined by Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bullwark and host of the Focus Group podcast. Sarah, good to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, you've conducted many focus groups with people who are Republican, but for a variety of reasons are not drawn to Donald Trump. What stands out to you the most about what these voters are saying?
Well, look, I've been conducting the focus groups now going on almost 6 years, and so I've watched Republican voters shift in real time. I would say going back to 2020, many of them said they didn't want to vote for him because of how he mishandled the pandemic. But many more for them, it was just the chaos. It was the character issue. I think this is something you may know something about, but when we were sort of young conservatives coming up in this movement, character was such an important element of what you were supposed to think about as a Republican. And much of it was a response to Bill Clinton in the late 90s. And so I think that was the movement that I came up in. And so for Donald Trump to be lionized in this way was disorienting for a lot of traditional Republicans, a lot of Mitt Romney, John McCain supporters. And then also the fact that Donald Trump insulted many of the Republicans that, the Republicans that we'd been voting for many cycles, that were the leaders of the party. Now, the fact was, though, he had a big following among both like a new segment that was coming into the party, a lot of non-traditional Republicans, but also people who'd been lifelong Republicans who had sort of soured on what they saw as establishment politics. And so you've seen this weird split over the years now, where there is a big chunk of the Republican Party, and in fact, the majority of it now, which says that they are Trump-first Republicans. They identify more with Trump than they do with the Republican Party. But for the people who are still there for sort of the principles of the Republican Party, those people feel increasingly alienated because Donald Trump doesn't really reflect the values of limited government, free markets, and American leadership in the world, and certainly doesn't reflect character.
Right. The conservative part, the conservatism is gone for a lot of conservative voters. I'm wondering if you're hearing from any of them about Nikki Haley. Were they with Nikki Haley? And who are those voters going to now?
Yeah, the Nikki Haley voters are an interesting category because for some of them, they're sort of not all one way. Some of them go back to Trump. They go home to Trump because, look, they don't like Trump, they don't prefer Trump, but they're always going to vote Republican no matter what. Then there's another segment of the Nikki Haley voters who are some of the people who have been being politically realigned out of the Republican Party, who sort of cycle after cycle are seeing increasingly that the Republican Party no longer looks like the one they joined. And many of those people voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And so they're continuing to vote for the Democrats. Then there's sort of a middle group that I think, we've long called the double haters or the double doubters, but they're basically people who are Republicans, don't want to vote for Democrats, but also really don't want to vote for Donald Trump. And so I think some of those voters are really up for grabs as we head into the election, because I think some of them could be persuaded to vote for Kamala Harris, and others of them likely are the kinds of people who will either go third party or leave it blank. I hear this from Republican voters who are fed up with Trump all the time, who still feel like they can't vote for Democrats. They'll say, look, I'll just leave it blank. And frankly, in 2020, those voters made an enormous difference because you could see down ballot, many Republicans outperformed Donald Trump because Republican voters were voting for Republicans down ballot, but they left the top of the ticket blank or they voted for Joe Biden.
So you mentioned Kamala Harris. Do you think that the Harris campaign is doing enough to try to win over those disaffected Republican voters, the Nikki Haley voters, the double haters? Does she need to do more? Can she do more?
I mean, I've actually been genuinely impressed with how often they include in her speeches. She says, I want you in this coalition. There is room for you in this coalition. She said it specifically in the debate about voters who might not agree entirely on abortion, but still believe that there should be protection for women. She says, even if we have a moral difference, I still think there's room for you in this coalition. And I think that's the number one thing you have to do, right, is say, I want your support.
Right.